Well, what are we going to get into? Look at this. 2000 Ford Focus wagon. 188 some odd thousand miles. And steering column's worn out. It's clunking and bumping around, starting to squeak now. And it's time to replace it. So this is a replacement. And because nobody else on YouTube has done this, I'm going to try. And all I'm going to do is just pause in between sections. No fancy editing whithersoever. And I'm not sure how much actual filming of the actual work is going to occur. But as I find issues, turn the camera back on and point things out, and at least there will be that online. There was a post on the Focus Fanatics blog site years ago, but Photo Bucket lost the pictures, and now the step-by-step is pretty much useless. So let's try this. Show you more. So yeah, here's the patient. And hopefully this goes smoothly. Alright, well, my bad. This is, we can get in here. It says 740,000 miles on this guy. And this is what it's doing. Hopefully you can hear that clicking. And before we rip the column out and I get the lower bolster off and some light in there, I'll show where the failure point is on this particular column. But I wanted to show you that before we do anything else. We also have to disconnect the battery and the airbag fuses, any of them, so that this doesn't blow up in my face and bloody my nose. So we get to a further spot that anybody else would be able to see. Bring you back along. Okay, so we removed both battery terminals just to be safe. Pulled the 4 bolts to get the lower bolster off and get that out of the way. And then I pulled fuse number 60, which is the airbag module. And this was barely tight. That's the hood release. Pop this out of the lower bolster to get that out of the way. Then pull the airbag. And it's supposed to be a 5.5 millimeter, but a 6 does fit it. And release the 2 screws. You'll have to loosen the lock so that you can get that turned around. And it is the horn and airbag is this connector. This connector here is for cruise control, which this car is not outfitted with. So that's what the explanation of this is. We're ready to start disconnecting the wire harness for wipers and everything else. So when we get to the next section, I'll bring you back. Okay, just a quick tip here. Just a tip. The harness. The wiring harness for the steering column. These 2 Christmas trees will release if you are careful. And ginger. Fit up in here similar to this. Pair of pliers like so, to grab those trees, give them a little squeeze, and they'll pop right out. And that'll make things a lot easier and allow that to drop right out. And it's looking like we're getting ready to get after that pinch bolt, to loosen that. But I'm going to mark it with a piece of chalk or something that I can find. Maybe if I get a white crayon or something, maybe black Sharpie, worst case, just to mark where the bolt is actually on the shaft coming up from the steering rack. And then we can get at the 4 bolts. Let's see if I can turn this and see at the same time. There's the bottom 2, to be able to drop the whole column right out of the car. This has been 45 minutes of me really just taking my time. Not even 45 minutes so far. So I'll bring you back when there's more to show. Oh yeah, before we get this torn apart any further, let me show you. Take a look at the steering column. Let's see if I can get some extra light shining up in here. Okay, here's the fat main shaft, first universal, second universal down in there, and then down to the stick that goes to the steering rack. Watch that as I'm turning the wheel against the lock. Actually, I'm not even turning it against the lock. But I pull it back here. Showing you how much slop we've got here. And as you can see, the column doesn't turn. Wheels turn in 2 degrees before it catches, and then it starts to grab. So this is why we're replacing this. And if I actually, that doesn't have as much slop as a couple other people have posted where that backed off. I don't think that's the case with this column. I think at the first stage of the column is worn out, and that's why we've got this, and it would click, and I mean, it made me think that I had a bad ball joint or bad steering rack, but no, it was the frickin' column. Can you believe that? Anyways, so far so good. Pinch bolt is loosened down here, and we're going to get this out here very quickly. Show you more. Well, crap, that was easy. Take the 4 bolts out, and a little bit of wiggle and a little bit of tap, and that came right out and off that pivot. This must be why nobody else made a video, because it was just too easy. We'll see how well it goes back together. Yeah, that's a new wheel and column in. There's the light. Okay, so that pinch bolt threads through the stub out from the steering rack. So the threads are actually on the other side of the female portion of the rod, and it's drilled through the rod that comes up from the rack. So there's no way for that to slip unless that bolt backs out. And I think there's going to be an interference there with the floor pan if that bolt were to back out. The only difficulty I had so far was the T35 Torx. Whenever the junkyard removed this from the donor car, that clip was out of alignment. And now we're going to see if all of our plugs made up. And we're going to keep moving forward. I'm about an hour and 15 minutes into this, and this isn't ripping and tearing. This is going slow. So this is pretty stinking easy. And I'll show you more later. All right, well, a couple things of note. Columns in, bolted down, bolted to the framework of the dash. All good. Until I went to plug everything in. Wiper stock plugged in perfectly fine. Turn signal stock plugged in perfectly fine. The PATS connector plugged in without a problem, but when I tried by hooking the battery up in the car, this ring, here we go, this ring for the PATS is part of the whole security thing. It has to match the chip in your key. So not only did I have to change out the lock cylinder, but I also had to change this ring from the old worn out column as well, so that the security would allow the car to start. But before I got that far, I found that when I was looking at the two columns side by side, that the connector for the clock spring on the new column, which came out of a 2007 model year, was different than this guy. And it's not the same external connection, and it would not fit. So this was off the new column. So that's second generation, and first generation is more of a rather than that type, instead of that type of connection, first generation is, let's see if I can undo this on camera with one hand. Maybe not. Anyways, the connector doesn't mate up, plain and simple. So I had to change the clock spring from the old column to the new column. So these are the two things that I had to swap out: the PATS ring and the clock spring. And I just got finished testing it by reconnecting the battery, putting a key in it, going through everything. Wipers work, signals work, high beam switch works, and I've now disconnected the battery so that I can put the airbag back in, and then I'll put the fuse in, and then I'll reconnect the battery and triple check everything again, maybe with a goalie mask on my face just in case the airbag decides to go boom. And I'll show you a little bit more with it finally buttoned up. Okay, here we go, moment of truth. Final check. We've got our PATS flashing. Beep, beep. Here's the key. There's our dash lighting up. The wheel. It starts. Left signal, right signal. Turn the lights on. High beam indicator on and off. airbag light is not lit. Wipers. Intermittent. Slow speed. Fast speed. Front sprayers. It's not going to show up in the rear view in the camera, but the rear wiper switch works even though the rear wiper motor is down. Wheel works. No bumping and clunking. I did have to put the replacement column came from a car that had cruise. I had to put it because the backside here is molded differently than a car. You can't see that. Maybe you can through there. This backside here is molded differently than the other. Let's shut this off. Job complete. We just finished putting the cowling back on, and we got tilt wheel now, for as much as it does. But that's it. Success. Hope this helps anybody else. Thanks for watching. Bye.